We are good to go. Hello everyone that is watching this podcast. This is the first time I'm attempting to do something like this, and I don't know if this is the first time Square Root has ever done anything like this, but we are going to be talking a little bit about a little war game. I'm joined by Sqrtofneg1, and in case you're new to Little War Game, in case you're watching this, trying to get into the game and learn more about it from listening to two people having a conversation. Square Root of -1 is one of the developers of Little War Game, and you'll get to hear a lot of his kind of design inputs on the game, a lot of his philosophy. A lot of my questions for today are particularly about Square Root of -1, and if he wants to talk about the game, that's probably what we'll be doing, especially since we've made this connection over the name, over the game. So, one of the questions that I really hate when people kind of get to know each other is they'll ask this question like, "Tell me a little bit about yourself." And for me, that is whenever I get that question asked to myself, I just like my spirit is just crushed immediately. It's like, where do I even begin? How do I even like tell people who I am in like 2 3 sentences? It's a little bit too much. So what I will say, or what I'll ask, is maybe something a little bit more specific to Square Root, and ask him what his background is, and then also what his background in Little War Game is.
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me here. I'm really glad to be here and just have this opportunity to talk about stuff, talk about Little War Game. Um, yeah, he did a really good introduction, but I'll introduce myself a little bit more. How I came about to discover Little War Game and stuff like that. So I am someone who's a gamer, I guess, and I've been playing a lot of RTS games. I started all the way back in like Age of Empires 2, and that was the first RTS game that I discovered. And then eventually that became StarCraft and also StarCraft 2. And then how I discovered Little War Game is I think around like 2015, 2014. I was like bored in class. I think I was in like high school or something like that. And yeah, so I was just like searching browser games, browser RTS games, and that's how I came to discover Little War Game. So I played a little bit around in 2015, but then I kind of forgot about it and then I actually rediscovered the community in like 2019, 2020, something like that, where I was like, it was like COVID and everyone was staying home. So I was like bored out of my mind and everything. So I rediscovered Little War Game and I've been a part of it ever since.
That is such a funny. I think this is a coincidence because that seems to be very familiar to my background as well. I think I started getting into Little War Game a little bit before COVID. I think it
Hmm.
was like 6 months before COVID. Norm was still on. He was usually on the in the lobby, and whenever new players kind of signed up, he would play games with them, and that's kind of how I got started. Um, I'll tell you this really quickly because it just shows how long Little War Game has been around, and how people like us who like get connected into the community have seen the game beforehand. So
Right.
I want to say in like 2012, I remember I was 12 years old at that time, and I was going to the local library, and in the library they had this like kind of teen section where the teens could hang out and like play games and stuff, and they had a bunch of computers. And I remember I was on YouTube on this computer, and I was looking up games because I think I was the only kid in the library, and I want to play a game. And I found a video on Little War Game, and that took me to the webpage when I was 12. And I tried it out. I think I played a game against some people. Like I tried to play a competitive game against players who were playing at the time, and I got absolutely crushed. I didn't know what I was doing,
Yeah.
yeah, especially as a 12-year-old. But the funny thing is, I remembered just like walking through the school halls. I remembered that I had watched that video, and I was really curious. I was like, "Hey, I wonder if that game is still around. I wonder if people are still playing. I wonder if I could learn it." And that kind of just prompted me to check out the website. and that's when I met Norm. He was the first person I interacted with. He probably spent like 3 hours showing me how to play the game, specifically like the Raider opening, which I thought was
Yeah.
really generous of him. So yeah, that's amazing. You got into it from StarCraft and that kind of side. So I remember just in preparation for doing this podcast together. I remember that I watched or I had the pleasure of watching some of your videos that you post on YouTube. So not only are you a developer of Little War Game, you're actually a content creator. So can you talk a little bit about kind of how your experience of content creation has been going so far?
Yeah. So content creation is something I'm not too familiar with, if I'm being completely honest. It's just kind of something that I wanted to give back to the community and do something for the community. I think like my personal interest is definitely more of just playing the game because I enjoy the game.
Mm-hmm.
But as for the content creation side of things, I was thinking about what would be beneficial to like a newer player, or what would be, I guess, exciting to a player. And then the first thing that came to mind was like the ladder maps and like the rank system. So my first idea was, hey, maybe I should just do a series of introducing all the ladder maps and like pointing out some interesting things, maybe some like wall offs, stuff like that. So that was my initial idea. I think I did 2 videos and I started a third, and then I kind of was like, is this really like? I kind of ran out of things to say
Mm-hmm.
because it was like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of maps are kind of similar. It's not like there's too much strategic diversity, and I felt like it didn't warrant a new video for each map kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was kind of my first steps into content creation. And then after that, I hosted a tournament. I've done like a tournament recap. Um, so yeah, probably more stuff like that is probably on its way, potentially. We'll see about
Mm-hmm.
that. But I definitely do enjoy the content creation side of things as I get more into it, like hosting tournaments and stuff like that. So we'll see about that. I actually do have an idea of something that I wanted to do for content creation side of things. I was thinking about having like a guess the guest kind of thing, where it's like some people, yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of play on words there, where some people like upload replays and then we've tried to figure out who the guest is and be like, oh, well, you analyze it and it's like, oh, that building placement reminds me of like Weird Rat or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
that'd be cool, but we'll see if that happens, maybe.
Mm-hmm. That's funny. That's funny. Great idea. I think you would probably always be able to tell if it was me playing Rax because I send Worker Scout every game, and it's pretty apparent. Recently, I have been getting into Wolf play. I think I played a game. I played 3 games against Albardo today, playing
Mhm.
with Wolf, going house Wolf Den house, playing with a bunch of wolves and kind of experimenting with how that feels. And it's interesting. It's very very interesting. I think that would be such a cool idea. A guess the player from getting to watch the game. You would immediately know who DC is. You would immediately know who I am. You'd probably have a harder time being able to identify. I want to say like Weird Rat and yourself. I think you two would be the hardest to identify, specifically because you two play each other a ton. So, do you feel like just because I know how much you play the game, you play it pretty often, and it feels like your contemporary or your rival. I would say not necessarily in a negative way, your rival, but definitely someone who spars with you often. Would definitely be Weird Rat. So, how do you feel like that relationship between you two as players has been developing over the, I want to say, year that you've been playing against each other pretty consistently?
Yeah. Before I answer this question, I'm gonna go back a little bit where when first rejoined Little War Game in like 2020 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Played most of my games with actually Yami Blaba, who is a very skilled player, definitely one of the top tier players, and I would lose pretty much every single time. I think I won a total of like 2 games against him. Um, and then so that was like my main practice partner, or like the person I played the most games with.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he left, I think I played most of my games overall with Weird Rat. So we definitely know each other's styles a lot. Like we know our builds and stuff like that. So if we had like a guess the guest, I would be very confident in guessing, identifying Weird Rat and
Okay.
his play. But as for this sort of rivalry thing, definitely when we first started playing together, I would be heavily favored. I think I would like pretty much never lose a game against him.
Okay.
But he's improved very much,
Mm-hmm.
and to the point where I'd say we're somewhat evenly matched. I'd still say
Mm-hmm.
I'm slightly better, but yeah, I think it's a real treat to have someone, especially in such a small community, who is similar to your skill level, and you're able to play a lot,
Mm-hmm.
with like time zones and stuff. So I'm really thankful to have him as a friend, and also just be able to play games. Message him on Discord, be like, hey, you want to play some games? He's like, sure, yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
then so we play a lot. But of course, stuff like that, it does mean that there's a lot of mind games when it comes to playing because we know each other so well.
Yep.
But yeah, it's definitely a treat to have him as, I guess, a contemporary and as a friend as well.
Mm-hmm. I remember I was watching your tournament recap. It seems to be the majority of your content in terms of um, like minutes on your YouTube channel, which makes sense because you play a ton of games, especially if you're playing in tournaments and there's a lot of minutes in a game. So that makes a ton of sense. How much play or how much impact do you think mind games has on the game of Little War Game?
Mind games. The thing about mind games is it only works if you actually like know the player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And given like the small community that we have, there are definitely a lot of things that you can exploit in people's specific play styles and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, I think the only reason why these mind games works is because you know the player, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if I were to play against someone who I've never played against, then obviously that wouldn't work. And because of this community being so small, especially like the
Mm-hmm.
people who play competitively,
Yep.
like, there's definitely a lot of room for mind game. Some examples include like my games against Weird Rat, or also the snipe build that I prepared against AC
Mm-hmm.
on Ravage. Stuff like that is very player dependent, and I guess that feeds into the mind game sort of things in the war game.
Just for people that are a little bit newer, could you define what your snipe build against AC was?
Yeah, sure. So I do have a video on that. You can take a look. I'm sure maybe Neagat will post a link in
Sure,
the description
one hundred
here.
percent.
But yeah, thank you. But AC is a very good player. He likes to do this one den expand into a quick dragon's lair and be very harassment heavy on his with his dragons.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I noticed in my games against him is he would always build his dragon's lair on the edge of his base on Ravaged,
Yeah.
so like next to the cliff. And obviously that saves a little bit of time where your dragons, fly across the map,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's a little bit more quote unquote optimized. But I realized that I could potentially abuse that and just build like a tower on the low ground,
Mm-hmm.
which is a build that I had prepared. So essentially, what I did is I went over like 2 or 3 AC replays and I checked the timings on when he would normally build that dragon's lair, and then yeah, and then so I just created a build to do that and just build a tower on the low ground, get a bird,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah,
I rem-
it worked out great.
yeah, I think I casted that game too, because
Mhm.
I remember I think the Dragon Lair was like almost completely finished, and
Mhm.
and you had like two catapults that basically was able to destroy it before you got any dragons out. Um, and I started chuckling. I was laughing because uh, in terms of my own development with Little War Game, this is a lesson that Weird Rat taught me. Like I want to say, like half a year ago, I used to build my advanced workshop in the top corner, or bottom corner if you're on the top side of Ravaged. But it used to be in the corner opposite of the castle. And I remember I was playing against Weird Rat, and he would siege my base with archers, with catapults, and especially with catapult drops. He was able to go into the main base and do some harassment, and then he could kind of rest his airship and unload his two catapults right on the edge of on the low ground where the archers can't really shoot the catapults, and the catapults would just basically destroy the advanced workshop. So he was someone who taught me that building placement, especially for your tech, is really important. You have to make sure you're not going to get abused for like silly decisions like where you place your buildings.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. With that being said, something that I kind of want to cover or at least potentially address is the idea of development in this game, specifically with player development, players getting better at the game, players understanding a little bit more. Um, Little War Game is like it's an RTS. It's similar to StarCraft, where um, the relationships between units can be pretty intense, but it's also up to the player to be able to control those units, to be able to understand where that those armies are winning or where they're losing, and then how to position better. So, in line with the idea of development, um, what I've been able to see from the community, which I think is so incredible, is people like Norm. When he was around, I'm pretty sure he's still around, but he plays a lot less often. And people like Weirdrat who spend a lot of time, almost like an unsustainable amount of time. It feels like with people who are just learning about the game, exploring the game. An example I can give about this in particular is specifically it's Jay. I'm
Hmm.
I'm sure you're familiar with him. He's relatively new. I want to say like he's probably his entire Little War Game playing career, I guess, has only lasted what like maybe 4 or 5 months, maybe less. I remember when I got to meet him, he was starting his Rax play. Weird at yourself. I think even Norm at one point were playing games against him and very uh, like complimenting his play with Rax a lot. So that was very encouraging. But what I will say is that it seems to be the case that most players who become um, I guess consistent little war game players first have to be kind of like brought on board by one of the players of the community. I'm curious if you see that or if you see that in a different way. Um, yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts on that general idea is.
Yeah, so just want to clarify, is it more like a newer player coming into the game and like it has to be like someone kind of taking them under the wing and like
Mm-hmm.
showing them the ropes and stuff like that?
Yeah,
Is that
exactly. So yeah, so you're right. I should clarify. So it feels like um, the the most or the best way that we've had player retention in Little War Game is specifically through a pipeline of people kind of teaching them, like personally teaching them how to play the game.
right? Yeah. I definitely agree. I think one of the things is that the RTS genre is a very difficult genre. I'd say definitely more difficult to pick up and learn compared to most other genres of games. Um, for example, let's say like I don't know, like an FPS or like a shooter game, right?
Mm-hmm.
If something like that, there's a tutorial where you learn how to move, WASD, and like you also learn how to shoot, and then pretty much instantaneously you can get into a game and you can have a little bit of fun. But the thing is, with RTS games, be it StarCraft or Little War Game or any other RTS game, it's a lot more difficult because there's a lot more things you need to learn. There's a lot more things you need to be aware of, and I think it leads to a lot of new players just coming into the game. It's like, oh, yo, that's pretty cool. And then once they actually start a game, they're kind of overwhelmed and they're like, no, I don't think this is for me. And then them just leaving. So the idea of having people who teach newer players and like explain things and identify and like give them like a helping hand, be like that guiding presence
Mm-hmm.
is really important for the game and really important for just having those new players and like keeping those new players as well. As for how that is also something that I think as a development team we are thinking about, and like, oh, how can we make the tutorial a little bit better, or how can we um, improve the new player experience essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so there's a lot of as a community, I think we also really need to be thankful for those players who like Norm or whoever else. For me personally, when I rejoined the game, it was like Yummy, blah blah, and Hobo
Mm-hmm.
actually,
Mm-hmm.
who were
Yeah.
really kind to me and just like showing me the ropes and stuff like that. So we really, as a community, should be really thankful for these players. I think
Mm-hmm.
who give up their time because they enjoy the game and like share it and explain it to newer players.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually really encouraging to see how much um, like those new players who get involved, like let's say for myself, if Norm wasn't there to kind of teach me the game, to show me how enjoyable it can be, how fun Raider Micro can be, then I probably wouldn't have thought much about the game. I probably would not have been making videos on it, and um, yeah, I wouldn't be having a conversation with you, I suspect. So it's really encouraging to see how people just giving up a little bit of their time to show new people how to play the game is like rewarded exponentially. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Um, so that being said, since we're talking about development in the game, we know that there's a couple of playstyles, and we kind of are seeing a lot of those playstyles begin to merge. We're in 2022, and it feels like there's no such thing as just pure Rax. There's no such thing as just pure mech. There's no such thing as pure beast anymore. Whereas I want to say when I got into Little War Game, people like Slammer 4 were definitely, as far as I can tell, they were definitely playing pure beast or pure Rax or pure mech, things like that. So I'm curious from a development side, how do you see the game? Do you see it as kind of a merging of all play styles, or do you see it maybe as there's like three distinct factions? Sure, they can merge a little bit, but you definitely want to have like a specific play style.
Right. So the three factions, as they're called, I guess, they're distinct in the way that the upgrades only scale in within that specific faction. So that's like a kind of a, I guess, a soft barrier. A soft like, yeah, a soft barrier between playstyles and factions. But unlike in like StarCraft 2, where you would have to select your race before you even start the game, and then you're like, obviously you can't start a game with Terran and be like, oh, maybe I should do Protoss in the middle of the game and switch over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think as for your statement of like, a lot of people are more being like hybridization, mixing styles. I think that general trend is a thing, but I don't think it's like drastic or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the big upgrade thing is still a pretty big barrier between um like choosing or mixing and matching races and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But as for whether or not it's like a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's really good just because the game doesn't limit you into playing just a specific thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, let's say you play against someone and you think, yo, catapults are so overpowered. I can't believe, it's not even fair. Then what you can do is you can literally just do the same thing he did or
Mm-hmm.
they did, right? Because whatever your opponent can do, you can also do because you're not limited by any starting factors where you have to choose your
Mm-hmm.
race or choose your faction. So I think that's part of the really the beauty of it, and yeah. So I think just the ability to be flexible, the ability to choose whatever you want to do and react accordingly. For example, let's say you're playing Beast, but then you get tower rushed in the early game. Then you can be like, bam, catapults, let's go, and like break the towers and play on from there.
Yeah.
So I think just that flexibility is really good, and um, just like mixing styles is also really fun. I think that's also why a lot of people tend to do that these days.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's a good thing for the game. I think it's something that a lot of people are experimenting with, as you said. But that being said, I don't think like everyone is doing it. There is still definitely some people who are like, I'm only gonna play Rax or I'm
Mm-hmm.
only gonna play Beast, and that's totally fine too.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the idea of balance is a really interesting one with Little War Game, because sure, you have a couple of different openings and a couple of different styles you can try to go for if you want to open with a workshop and play into mech, or if you want to open with a barracks and play raiders. That's a possibility. You can do that. Most of the openings are relatively even into each other. I guess if you play two racks, you're going to try to be a little bit more aggressive, but there's a downside into that as well. But the fact that you can go into the same thing your opponent is going into is so cool. I don't think any other RTS has this idea. With Age of Empires, you have different different nations.
Yeah.
With Warcraft, you have different races. With Starcraft, you have different races. I don't think anything has been able to, and this is the funny thing, because this is not a new game. I don't think anything has been able to match the symmetry and the balance that is possible in Little War Game. Um, I will say this though, sometimes it feels like certain units are less preferable in certain situations, and then obviously more preferable in other situations. For instance, if you have a bunch of soldiers and you have a bunch of catapults, you probably don't want that unit comp together, because your soldiers are probably going to take friendly fire from the catapults. So there's this idea of symmetry, but you also have to find the right unit composition in order for whatever you decide to go to make sense.
Right, I agree. Definitely, just because the game is flexible and allows you to do a whole bunch of things doesn't mean it's a good idea, right? Like, you could, like your example with soldiers and catapults. Yeah, I mean, yes, you could do it, and you could definitely make it work, if you're good enough. But
Mm-hmm.
just like how the synergy happens, it's not exactly the best
Mm-hmm.
combination, I guess, right? Because of the friendly fire, as you mentioned. So yeah, like there are definitely things that this sort of thing comes with like theory crafting and experience and just trying things out. But yeah, I think it's just definitely a good thing that people are a lot more open and a lot more um, like receptive, and just that ability to flex and incorporate different styles
Mm-hmm.
of play and different units into your gameplay as well.
Mm-hmm. So now I kind of want to talk a little bit about meta, which is really funny because we were just talking about balance. But the, I think 1 or 2 patches ago, we used to see a lot of werewolf dragon play. Um, Specifically, Weird Rat was doing. I think, and I think you played a lot of games against Weird Rat, so you probably have something to say about this. But Weird Rat was playing a lot of Beast at the time, and it definitely felt like Werewolf Dragon was probably the strongest composition in the game, and and people were having a lot of I guess struggles against that. Specifically, if you're playing Rax. So I will say this. At one point, it definitely felt like the meta kind of forced you to either go beast to match it, or to go mech to get some catapults and try to destroy the werewolf army from that position. The funny thing is that me and Weird Rat, we had some play tests where we maxed out on the best Rax army that I could build at the time. It had mages, it had catapults, it had archers. It had some pretty strong units, I want to say. Some ballista in there as well. And then Weird Rat just went for some werewolves and dragons, pretty much. And we just saw those two armies go up against each other, and it was kind of stunning how clearly the beast army was doing. And this is not the current patch. I don't see a lot of players playing this now, but I will say at that time it felt like the strongest unit composition you could go to. So with things like meta being present, with things like mass catapult. Um, you're someone that's, I believe you're someone that touches design and touches balance, I would say. And so I'm curious, when you're in those positions where you're observing the meta, do you have like a checklist of things that you want to like maybe nerf because they're too strong, or do you want to give time for people to develop potential counters, or you are a strong player, so maybe in your mind you could say, well, even though this player thinks that like mass archers doesn't work here, if he does like this thing or if he gets more upgrades, then maybe it's a little bit better. So I'm very curious how you approach the meta and balance.
Right. I think one of the biggest things with any sort of game balancing or metas and stuff like that is the, I guess, balancing for all levels of play.
Mm-hmm.
So what some like for example, something could be really powerful in like the lower like level of skill, but also like really like the opposite in higher levels of skill and stuff like that. So it really becomes like a balancing act of, do we want to balance it for the top levels of play? Do we want to balance it for the casual players, or do we want to do something in the middle and like try to split the difference? As for Little War Game itself, I think once again I'm gonna go back to, you can play whatever you want. So if you think Werewolf Dragon is really good, then oh, maybe you can try it. That's one of the things. But as for me personally, when that meta was really big, I didn't think that it was like super super strong. I thought it was like, yeah, okay, it's strong. Especially because I think that was a patch where we added back Werewolf Smash in again, and then actually reduced just the straight up damage or the attack speed of werewolves. I'm not exactly sure. Um, but yeah, there's definitely this sort of idea of, let it go, and then people will eventually find out counters or different, some sort of way to deal with it. Be it, an earlier push to deny them from getting to that stage or something like that, right? I think just the player base in general has a really good, like collectively is really good with stuff like that, where they're able to find new ways to abuse and um, to take advantage of specific playstyles. Um, so yeah, I think it's not as a huge issue in like metagames and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not saying the metagame isn't a thing,
Mm-hmm.
but just that there are definitely um, tools in the toolkit and stuff like that for people to adapt and make changes to their play and abuse specific parts. And also with having like different factions be quote unquote good in different stages of the game. I think that's definitely a thing, but I also think that's okay for that to be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in the early game, early mid game, raiders are really good because of their micro potential, their high skill ceiling, um, and just like because of the regenerative abilities, you
Mm-hmm.
can like deal a little bit of damage, blink out, and then just come back in a few minutes later, a couple seconds later, to do more damage and stuff like that. And stuff like that, where different factions have different strengths. Where maybe raider play is really good in the early game, but like in the late game, catapults are really good and werewolves are pretty good. I think that's definitely. I mean, I'm saying those opinions are valid, but I'm also think that it's a good thing that there's like diversity in that way. So let's say you really want to be like a macro player, you want to be someone who gets into that late game and then plays, a very strategic, very drawn out game, then maybe you should play more beasts and maybe a bit more like racks, or sorry, not racks, mech play, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that sort of suits your play style. Whereas if you really like sharp timings and like hitting them with like a 1-2 punch kind of play style, then maybe Rax is for you. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe if you want to be like very multitasking and pull your opponent apart, then you can do that with like any race actually. Like you can do it with Kata drops, you can do it with like Rax soldier drops, stuff like that. Um, or like beast hit and run tactics. Split your army at your third, at your second, at your natural, stuff like that. So I think just having these specific different play styles and having these specific metas is a good thing. As for metagames, because of the small community and because of how people play, I think I think that's part of the fun and the excitement in it. Like where you can study what people are doing, you can identify what sort of builds people are using, sort of play styles that they're using, and then using that metagame to you know uh, iron out your build, come up with different builds, theory craft some things,
Hmm.
and say, hey, maybe this would be really good against what people are usually doing,
Yeah.
or stuff like that. I think that's really exciting, and that's one of my personal favorite reasons and my personal favorite things about Little War Game.
Hmm. We can even give an example of this happening like this week actually, because I remember I was on Discord. I was watching Square and Weird Rat play a game against each other, and I think Weird Rat was trying to go gyrocraft against your mech play, and mech seems pretty strong, but that's like an example of Weird Rat going, "Hey, this is what seems pretty strong right now. Let me see if I can find a counter and gyrocraft so that I can win the game through that." And and so it was really interesting. I even got to see you build some ballista to try to counter that. I know in my games, like 3 ballista destroys um, gyrocraft pretty well, especially if you have the like splash damage that the gyrocraft or that the ballista do. I think 3 on a group of ballista one shots the whole group. So yeah, so there's counters there, and there's a lot of development, and that goes back to the idea of players developing their own game, their own meta,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty exciting to see. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it's one of the things I love about this game. It's funny because I know me and It's Jay, we're both people that like to play against the computer a bunch. Whenever I'm on, I'll see, and It's Jay is on. I'll usually see him playing against the CPU, and I'm like almost sure he's experimenting with builds and he's experimenting with openings and kind
Yeah.
of like practicing those kind of stuff. And I do that a lot as well. Um, so I think it's helpful because it lets me be able to think about the game rather than thinking about the micromanaging of the opening. So something that's kind of really cool about Little War Game is despite its like smaller community, it has 3 developers. So it has Glaba, it has yourself, and it has AC. So I'm kind of curious what that team looks like. How much do you interact with each other? Do you guys have like weekly meetings or something? Yeah, I'm really curious about what the development side looks like.
Yeah, if I want to be completely honest, the development side, there is a bit of communication, but we don't have like weekly meetings or anything like that. Everyone has their own separate lives, and time zones are a thing and everything. So, um, and I think honestly, we all haven't been putting a lot of development work into Little War Game as much as we would like, given IRL stuff and the like. As for a little bit about behind the scenes, what we do is we do have a gyro board with tons and tons of things that need to be done, be it like bug fixes or quality of life improvements or new features and stuff like that. I think the backlog is at least 200 items, maybe even more.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so there are definitely a lot of things that are on our plate, like or on the chopping block, or I don't know what the best way to say it is, but
Mm-hmm.
I think for these days it's honestly just like whenever you're feeling like it, if you want to do something, if you want to fix a bug or if you want to add a feature, it's kind of your initiative, and it's like if you want to do something, go for it. And then like we usually get each other to code review, peer review, and fix things.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I also want to shout out our, resident Khaled,
Mm-hmm.
who's for those of you who don't know, he's someone who's been part of the community in a way or another for quite a while. Um, he's also the person who we do have to give credit for some of the um, what's it called, the performance changes that has been implemented into the game. So he's someone who isn't officially a part of the dev team, and I think there's definitely good reason for that, but I won't get too much into it. But he has also done some work for the game, so shout out to him as well.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about him actually because he's, but you pretty much answered my question. He's all over the patch 4.8.1 notes, where
Mhm.
he I think he's responsible for adding the attack speed display. Um,
No, that's me.
okay, that's you.
But
Okay, well, thank you for that.
I
That's
think,
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think some of them were like the performance stuff, and also a few bug fixes on with like how the game runs and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, he has done quite a bit of work. So um, yeah.
Yeah, we appreciate him. Yeah, and he's in the patch notes, and he was someone I never really saw before. I don't know if he plays very often, but I saw him, so I was like, oh, cool. We have someone kind of new developing and helping, which I think is really nice. So, that being said, with the three of you, you kind of described what I guess like what a normal work schedule for development looks like. Um, do you just kind of off the top of your head, when you consider Little War Game, do you have a vision of where you want Little War Game to go, or do you think kind of like what it is right now with the three styles of play and then the hybrid style of play? Um, is that a good spot for Little War Game to be in the future, or do you want it to move to
As
something different?
Yeah. As for where it is right now, I think from a balance perspective, the game is pretty balanced in my opinion. Or at least balanced enough so that like I don't think changes are required. Um, as for where I want Little War Game to be in the future, definitely if you know, for example, if we had more time, if the developers had more time, or I don't know, if we had a little bit more, I guess, motivation or passion, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
in a way, then there's a lot of things that are on the backlog that we really want to do, um, as for the game and for the community as well. For example, the AI builders, like we have, I think, two dedicated AI builders, and excuse me, and we've been looking to see and get their AIs implemented into the game. I know AC has been looking into that, and also I don't think he's gotten a lot of project progress on that recently, but it's still a thing. We were also thinking, hey, maybe let's get AIs onto the ladder so that you could, match up against the AIs and see how objectively well they would do against humans and stuff like that. So that was also an idea that we had that we are looking to implement. There are also, tons of bug fixes that still need to be done. Quality of life improvements for sure. There was talks about like improving the new player experience, like
Mm-hmm.
building a better tutorial. Also, stuff like a little bit of UI design. This UI has been around for a long time, so what do we want to do? Do we want to make it a little bit better, more appealing? And then there's also a lot of other features that we want to add as well, um, ideas as well. Um, for example, I don't know, we haven't had a new ladder map full in a while, so we're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about doing that potentially in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then some editor upgrades where we want to, quality of life stuff in the editor, and also um, stuff like triggers potentially we were thinking about adding. But yeah, these are all things that we want to do and we have on the list. But it's just like a matter of getting the time, getting the effort, finding the, I guess, the time and the effort to actually implement these things. One thing I will say about the code base is that because it is a legacy code base and because it is something that has been a product of a lot of work and stuff like that, it is sometimes pretty difficult to figure out how it works in the sense where if you touch something, maybe it messes up some other things, which obviously I think a lot of people in the community have seen when we release changes that haven't been properly tested.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, in the previous patch where we fixed, I think, the BR issue in the maps, I think that had a little bit of impact on people buying emotes, which we didn't test for some reason when we even added emotes in that update as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to quickly fix that and update that. So yeah, it's a bit of a challenge for sure, and it's also a bit of a motivational thing as well. Like for me, I definitely enjoy playing the game more than developing. So
Yeah.
if I have some free time, if I have like an hour or two,
You
I'd
know,
rather spend it playing Little War
exactly,
Game than
exactly, exactly.
yeah.
I 100% agree. Um,
But yeah, there are definitely things that we want to do and we have planned. So I'm hopeful that eventually we'll get some things done. But it's just progress is slow and understandably so.
yeah, yeah. You, it's kind of funny this idea to slow progress to me because over the 2 years, and it feels like a lifetime almost. These last 2 years, getting into Little War Game, learning about these players, it feels like they've had a full like life on Little War Game, getting to play each other, getting to have all these games. Like when I think of Hobo or when I think of Slammer 4, all these games, it feels like I've had such um, such a full life playing with them and playing against them and learning so much about them. And then we think about all the changes that happened since about 2 years ago, where competitive Little War Game used to be on Ravaged AA4, and all these AA3 and AA4 maps used to exist. I think maybe you can find some modded Ravaged maps that exist. Uh, they're somewhere in the map library. But the fact that AA4 became kind of the standard Little War Game experience um, is just a testament to how much change has been able to happen over the last 2 years. So much, so much. Even the button remapping was such a huge change. I remember,
Yeah.
before the button remap, it felt like it felt like I don't know. It felt like ecstasy in a way. It's like man, my hands know exactly where all the buttons are, and it's not comfortable, but it's like my hands love the feeling of knowing where everything is, even though it's in such a weird location on the keyboard. And now that the buttons are remapped, it took a while to relearn, but I have that same feeling where it's like I know where all the buttons are, and now my hands don't feel like crushed basically from having to kind of stretch all over the place. So how long have you been on the development team? Were you involved in any of those changes?
Um, Let me think. I'm not exactly sure. I want to say it's been a little bit more than a year. I'm
Mm-hmm.
definitely one of the newer members.
That's
I
fine.
think Glava's been doing it for quite a long time in AC
Mm-hmm.
as well. Um, as for the changes I've been responsible for, or like part of the when once when I first started joining and like adding to the changes, probably around I don't know. I want to say around like October last year. So yeah, about a year. Um, then yeah. So it's just I think this sort of like development thing it like comes and goes with like in
Mm-hmm.
different ways. Like for example, AC gets his wave and he does a whole bunch of changes and then he's like, okay, I'm done. I'm out for a while.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely something that happens, especially with just real life stuff as well. But yeah, I think it's okay. But ideally, if there's a part of me that's like, if I was able to spend a lot more time, then I could hammer out more bug fixes and quality of life changes. Add some new features. But yeah, it is what it is, and we do what we can, or we do what we're yeah, basically we do what we can
Yeah.
when we have time to do it.
As far as I know, I don't think any of the developers are getting paid. Um,
That's correct. Yeah, we don't get paid or anything.
yeah.
It's just out of the quote unquote goodness of our hearts and
Mm-hmm.
a passion for the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that already is so much passion. Like, I mean, I don't know any other or many other people who are as involved in the game as you are. You play consistently. You make videos and you work on the game. I don't think anyone can really ask much more from you than what you already do, and we're very appreciative of it. It's such an amazing game, and I guess despite all the bugs, it feels so stable. I don't think I have encountered a bug in the last like year of playing the game. Maybe I'm not doing what I need to do in order to make these bugs happen, but I remember um, it used to be a thing. Like you'd have to remake games basically. Like you'd get some bugs, um, but yeah, I haven't experienced any bugs in the last year. I want to say so amazing that we have such a well running game. Um, so for anyone who is maybe like, well, okay, so I'm gonna present two ideas and let me know what you think about them. So between Glaba, AC, and yourself, um, do you see this team of these three people um, being the developers for the game for as long as you guys are involved, or do you see a potential for um, onboarding like people like Khaled, I guess, or uh, say newer people who are interested in design, similar to yourself?
Yeah, I think the best way to address this question is how I came about to, join the development team and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, first things first, you do need to know, a little bit of coding in JavaScript because, if you don't, then we don't have the time to like teach you JavaScript and how to code, I think.
Yeah.
But what happened for me is that I think what happened was that AC was, coming out with a new patch, and he was like, set up a test server and was like asking people to test it. And then I was one of the people who were active during that time, and I was like, "Yo, okay, let's go. I'll help test." And then, one thing led to another, and I was like, "Hey, do you guys need more developers?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know how to code a little bit. I'm not the greatest coder, but I know how to. I know my way around, and like I can help out. I have experience in JavaScript a bit, so." And then he was like, "Yeah, sure." But the thing is, the reason why that worked is I think that I was already a part of the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it was just some random guy who you've never heard before, and they're like, "Yo, I want to, help out with a little war game," then I definitely think the development team would have been a lot more hesitant,
Mm-hmm.
and they would have probably flat out been like, I don't care how good you are at JavaScript or coding or anything like that. I don't care if you're willing to work, 8 hours a day on it if you are not part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so something like what Khaled is doing, for those of you who don't know, he's someone who actually has exploited some XSS vulnerabilities in the Little War game before. So in layman's terms, he's essentially hacked the game, quote unquote. So, um, we fixed those security vulnerabilities that he's been exploiting. But um, so yeah, someone like that with a track record of that, I definitely would say, even though he's definitely probably better at coding than me or probably some other people. I don't know about AC or Glava, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't think that's someone that we would want like to be permanently on the development
Right.
team.
Right.
So so yeah, it's a bit of a dichotomy. Like I know the people really want changes and things to be done, but at the same time, we want it to be something that's done out of, I guess, a passion for the
Mm-hmm.
game and like for the betterment of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
As for how long we will be continue to working, I don't. I can only speak for myself if I'm being honest.
Sure.
I
Sure.
have conjectures for AC and Glava, but for myself, I don't know. I don't have like a set, you know, I'll be done in a year or like I don't know. I want to do this for
Mm-hmm.
the rest of my life or something. I don't know. But I really as long as I have a passion for the game and I enjoy it, I think I'll be around, as a player and also as a developer.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's for me.
Yeah, no, no that point where you said you're not exactly sure how long you're going to be in the community, I 100% understand. I so understand that. I can give an example, a personal example where I think because we're both college students, we're both busy people. I think like earlier this year, I think I took like a 3 month break from making videos or playing the game just because I needed to focus on school.
Hmm.
But I still get a visit, like I still get to come back to the game, and even though I was gone for a little bit, I was still I can still come back to the community. I can still enjoy the game that I love so much. It's really interesting because I don't know if you're familiar with this other game, but at this point, these two games are at a very similar, I want to say, age and point in development, where I think both of these games are really well balanced, really well defined. They have their gameplay experience, but a lot of the creators for these games are becoming older. So I'm very curious if you're going to be aware of this game. Are you familiar with the MMO called Wizard 101?
No, I am not.
Okay, you're not. Okay. So it's a card-based game. It's for children basically to play. There's some strategy in there. There's this whole idea with your mana pool kind of growing over a bunch of terms. It plays like kind of like Hearthstone, where your mana increases, but your mana pool doesn't increase. So you can definitely run out of resources. But a lot of the community members for that game started making videos when the game kind of came out, which was about like 10 years ago. I think it came out in like 2012 if I remember correctly, which is pretty similar to when Little War Game came out. And we still see people in the community of that game continue to make videos, except one community member, someone a content creator. I think his name was Blaze. He had to retire from making videos because he needed to go into a full time job, and he was also ready to start a family. So we, there's this part of the game we have to kind of recognize that this game exists in kind of like for fun state. Like we play this game because we love playing it. We have a lot of enjoyment, but we also know that like real life is a thing. Like especially if we get older and we have families and um, or if we have responsibilities that we need to take care of, it's like doesn't make a lot of sense to give a lot of priority to Little War Game. But I am really happy about the community that we have. I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I think obviously we can't blame people who like leave the community for
Mm-hmm.
real life stuff, and obviously we don't like expect them to like obvious put that all into this game as well.
Yeah.
Like people like Norm, who's been a pillar of the community for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
He's been doing some IRL stuff with his job and stuff like that. I'm not exactly sure what, but like I hear he's doing well. So stuff like that, we have to accept. Or like Slammer, who's been gone for a while as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming also for real life stuff, but yeah, it's just it's just a part of life. It's just a part of what it is. And at the end of the day, Little War Game is just a game, right?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
can't really, yeah,
Yeah. It's funny because it's a game, but for you guys, it might also become work. Because coding is what you do. It's what you work on. So when you do work on the game, it really is because you're passionate about the game. Um, so there's more into the mindset there.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If people who've code 8 hours a day, if they don't want to look at code again when they get back
Yeah.
home.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, really big shout out to like Glava and AC who actually do these things, and even though they must be like in a way really bored to death with coding, but
Mm-hmm.
whenever there's a problem, like whenever I need help or something, they're always willing to give me a hand and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, really good people, really amazing, and still a big part of the community.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you wanted to talk about?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, not in particular. I was just open to literally anything.
Yeah, yeah,
So.
yeah. Um, I have one more question. It's on game design. It's a question
Mhm.
that I had in my mind, but you can answer however you need to. When you think of a catapult, do you think of kind of the tanky unit that the catapult currently is, or would you consider it to be a little bit more fragile? Like if a catapult got hit by a stone, say by another catapult, do you think it's fragile? Well, very similar to how it plays in Age of Empires, where if a catapult hits another catapult, it basically dies immediately. Um, so how much do you put theme into balance essentially, right? Because that's
Right.
my question basically. Because right now
Yeah.
in the game it feels like a tank,
Mm,
but
that's yeah. That's definitely. I see what you're getting at.
mhm.
I actually I don't remember who it was, but there was this discussion on the Little War Game, uh, thing where we were talking about dragons. Actually, it's like, what do you think about when you hear the word dragon? And then I was like, hey,
Yeah.
if you think about dragon, it's you think of like a huge, super powerful, really tanky, but also really powerful kind of unit where you would think, it's kind of like a battle cruiser in StarCraft 2, or like something that can take on entire armies and still, emerge victorious and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But in Little War Game, a dragon is kind of just, it's a good unit, but it's not like the behemoth that you think about when you hear the word dragon,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, gameplay versus like flavor design is something that we ideally, it wants to be like good gameplay wise balance, but also, flavorful as well.
Hmm.
Um, as for your like word with like catapults and how they feel, like yeah, like in real life, just a regular catapult would be very fragile and easy to break,
Hmm.
But I think just it's okay. It's not like a huge. I don't think it's like a huge flavor miss where it's like, oh no, I'm not gonna play the game because catapults are
Yeah.
tanky,
Yeah.
or I know
Exactly.
I'm not gonna play the game because like dragons aren't actually huge and
They're
dragony.
they're pretty big.
They are pretty big,
Yeah.
but it's not like yeah,
Dragon feels thematic. It would probably feel more thematic if it had like a fireball ability, like the mages. Yeah,
yeah,
but that would be a pretty strong unit.
mm,
All right,
yeah.
I think that was all my questions. We covered a lot of stuff about the game. We covered a lot of stuff about you in particular, and then some of your thoughts on development. So I think that's why I asked you if you had any other questions. So if anyone wants to, I guess, continue a conversation, talk to a developer, what is the best way they could do that for you?
Um, yeah, for me personally, I don't know about other people, but um, I pretty much read every single thing on Discord. So if someone comes up with like a balanced wine or, a bug that they've discovered or, suggestions for either like competitive or if someone's like, oh, I don't know, I think I need some help with I don't know, the Rax versus Beast meta or something. I do look at everything on the Discord. So if you have anything like that you want to bring up, then that's a good place to put your concerns and your feedback and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so you can also send me a message if I'm online on Little War Game, but I'd say that Discord for sure is the best way to ensure that your opinions and your comments are heard.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. And I'll definitely leave a link to your YouTube channel in the description, and I'll make sure to have the snipe build in there for sure since we reference it. I had a good chuckle when I watched that replay. It was so funny.
Mhm.
Um, all right. Well, if that's it, then Sqrtofneg1, it was such a pleasure having you on. I look forward to playing more games against you, and having more conversations in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, shout out to the people who are developing so Glaba AC. Um, and also shout out to Viret, really good player and always, willing to be down for games. And also just to everyone part of the community, there are tons of people who we haven't really touched about either, like the people in the modding side of things,
Yeah.
the AI side of
Yeah.
things, and just
People like
yeah.
Destroy Call
So
or Deathstroke. He works on a lot of
yeah,
AI, I believe. Yeah.
yeah. But anyways, thanks for being a part of the community, and yeah, that's it for me, I guess.
All right. See you guys next time.